Hello and welcome to Chapter 15 in International Business. Today we're going to talk about two more ways of entering foreign markets, and that's franchising and licensing. When you think about licensing, you think of two major companies, and that would be Nike licensing the swoosh worldwide, and Disney, which licensed the princesses and all of the different cartoon characters and all the different names of the cartoon characters worldwide for different merchandise, trash and trinkets, t-shirts, clothing, and all those types of things. When you think of franchising, most people think of McDonald's. They're the bell cow in franchising, but Starbucks is also a huge franchiser, and they are huge in emerging markets like China and Russia. They are going crazy with their franchising over there. So those are really the two that we think about. We're going to talk about all kinds of different things with regards to licensing and franchising, but it all depends on intellectual property, including trademarks, copyrights, and all the other things. We in the United States recognize, and most advanced economies recognize, intellectual property as an asset. However, the problem when you start going abroad is some countries don't. So we're going to talk all about that in this particular chapter with licensing and franchising. So let's get started. As I said in the video introduction, today we're going to talk about licensing, franchising, and other contractual strategies. First of all, we need to know some definitions. First, the contractual strategy, entry strategies is any type of cross-border exchange, and it could be anything from allowing someone to license a patent, to license a logo, to allow someone to use some technology, to allow someone to actually create a company much like yours. However they want to do it, that's a contractual entry strategy. Intellectual property is what we call ideas or works or trademarks, we call them. Trade symbols, the Nike swoosh, the golden arches from McDonald's, all those types of things are called intellectual property. Intellectual property can be a patent, it can be a copyright, it can be a book, it can be a song, it could be any type of thing that has been created by the mind. So here's your definitions. We're going to talk about licensing, franchising throughout the video. Royalty really is a fee paid periodically for either licensing or for franchising. Oftentimes it's a percentage of gross sales. Sometimes it's on a monthly basis. Sometimes it's a percentage of profit. Not very often, but because profit's really easy to hide. Most of the time, it's a percentage of gross sales. And that percentage of gross sales is usually due to either licensing or franchising. Licensing is an agreement in which you let someone use intellectual property. The intellectual property can be a trademark. It can be a name. For instance, Warner Brothers licenses Harry Potter. The name Harry Potter and the symbol Harry Potter. It could be the Nike swoosh. It could be anything. Franchising is when you grant someone the right to use the entire business system. And oftentimes franchising includes helping someone get started, doing some consulting work. The bell cow for franchising is McDonald's. Right now, the big thing for franchising is Starbucks. They do a lot of franchising throughout the world. So the unique aspects of contextual relationships, it's governed by a contract. And that's the big thing, is that contract has to be very solid and very, very bulletproof, because there's different ways of getting around contractual agreements when someone uses some different intellectual property and they don't pay, or they use it in a way that it's not meant to be. All of those types of things have to be involved in a contract. The thing about it is contracts, as we know, there's different types of legal systems throughout the world. There's civil law, there's common law, there's religious law, and there's really totalitarianism. So with regards to that, you've got to be very careful as you do contracts in different countries because contracts can be null and void. It can be left up to the not political system, but the legal system, and that could be a problem in some countries. Generally speaking, contractual relationship involve exchange of intangibles, something that is not something that you can't touch. Even if someone, say, makes a car, the contractual relationship oftentimes is using the engineering or the design of the car or the trademark of the car or the name of the car, like GM or something like that. And oftentimes it's used with different other relationships like FDI and exporting. The thing about contractual relationships is it's very dynamic, it's very fluent, it's very flexible. You can allow people to use it. You can have it for as long a term as you want. And it's very, very, very lucrative for those people that are licensing their intellectual property. The problem, and we're going to get into this in a minute, the problem with contractual relationships is you lose a lot of control over your brand. You lose a lot of control over your name. You lose a lot of control over the quality of your services, etc. For instance, well, I'll get into that later. You don't have to worry about that, but I've got a couple of examples of that. It can reduce perception of the firm if it is used incorrectly in different markets, but it can generate very consistent earnings from foreign operations. I know that at the TCM group, we license our material to different colleges and different companies, both here and also in continental Europe. The TCM group is the company that I used to work for. And we license material to not only to firms for their intellectual property and for their training, but we also license it to different universities, both domestic and abroad. And it's a consistent earning every month that we get from it because of the licensing agreement. So typical types of intellectual property: patents, trademarks, copyrights are the big three. Trademarks can be, and there's also brand marks. There's trademarks, there's brand marks, there's copyrights. Copyrights include books, it includes music, it includes paintings, those types of things. So intellectual property rights are really a legal claim that the licensor, the person who's licensing it, can make. And it's a claim for usually a monetary type of settlement or agreement. Generally speaking, in all of the advanced economies and advanced countries, intellectual property is looked at as an asset and is protected under asset laws. In some of the emerging markets, it is, and some of it is not. And in some of the developing economies, definitely intellectual property rights are not usually looked at as being protected by law. But it does provide inventors an incentive because it provides them for a monopoly that says that that's their invention and they can be the ones that make money for it. And again, you know, I've talked about this before. The reason people invent things, people do things, is because they want to make money. Greed is good in this particular case. And without legal protection, then people will not invent something. There's little incentive to develop things. So a licensing agreement specifies the nature of the relationship. Here's a couple examples. Intel licensed its right to its processor to a manufacturing company in Germany. Warner Brothers has made billions of dollars on the Harry Potter books and the movies to companies worldwide. Disney licenses the right to cartoon characters. They license the right to the Mickey Mouse type of logo. So what happens is Warner Brothers bought the rights for Harry Potter from J.K. Rowling's. And now Warner Brothers then licensed that Harry Potter books and movies companies worldwide. Typical deal, the licensee pays the licensor a fixed amount. Usually it's around 2 to 5% of gross sales. And those gross sales are usually determined by taxes. So people will look at their tax, what am I trying to say? Their tax forms, and know how much sales are generated by that, and it's 2 to 5%. One of the problems with licensing agreements is it's easy to hide revenue. Usually there's a fixed amount also involved in that, so you license it for, say, $2 million plus 2 to 5%, and that's the initial cost of transferring the licensing asset. And then there's also all types of different licensing agreements and licensing arrangements that companies can make between the licensor and the licensee. So here's a good model of licensing as a foreign market entry strategy. It's intellectual property. You've got the licensee on the right, the licensee on the left. I'll let you kind of go through this model, but it's a real good that shows who gets what and what's happening. Usually the licensee pays a lump sum payment and then royalties, and they get know-how and other cross-licensing agreements. And generally speaking, the licensors provides the intellectual property and any supporting products such as components, raw materials, or anything like that that need to be done. For instance, with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has patented the Coca-Cola Red, so the supporting products would be giving the color scheme to the licensee throughout the world. So there's a lot of different things that are done here as an entry strategy for licensing. International licensing is really common. There's a couple of examples with Planters and Sunkist. Coca-Cola has licensed Avion, and is a bottled water. And if you look, most companies are cross-licensing either their products or using another products. It's very lucrative for them because, for instance, for the French company Danone, I think, D-A-N-O-N-E, Coca-Cola already has distribution, so it made sense for them to license their Avion because they got immediate distribution. So that's why a lot of people use licensing agreements in food and beverage products, because it's immediate distribution worldwide. Trademark licensing, the bell cow here is Nike. They license that swoosh to all kinds of people. They don't make the backpacks. They don't make the clothing. In many cases, they license that swoosh to golf club manufacturers. Well, not anymore. They don't make golf clubs anymore, but to manufacturers like that. Harry Potter generates millions of dollars for Warner Brothers with little efforts because of using the Harry Potter name on different trash and trinkets and different toys and things like that. So trademark licensing, the bell cow again is Nike and Disney, and also, different universities. The Ohio State University licensed their products all over the world, etc. Copyright licensing is licensing rights to produce art, music, literature, software, books, songs. For instance, if you look at, there's a lot of remakes of songs. There's a lot of, I think they call it sampling, because a lot of rap songs will sample other songs. They need to do that through a copyright agreement. They do it throughout the world. Protection varies copyright protection varies by country, but usually it's the creator's life plus 50 years in advance. And then oftentimes whoever owns the copyright will renew it after the 50 years. Oftentimes, though, especially in emerging nations like China, like most of the BRIC companies, they don't look at copyright as a licensing as it pertains to intellectual property. Know-how licensing is providing know-how, providing consulting work, providing engineering, trade secrets, patents, and other know-how in order to make somebody successful in making a product. Generally speaking, that royalty can be lump sum or a running royalty depending. All right, so that concludes part 1. We will be back with part 2 in just a minute.